So in this one, we have 6a, a squared, and 14. Now, like I mentioned, the variables tend to be more straightforward. You want to look for which of these has the smallest amount of a's. And since 14 does not have any a's, we can conclude right away that we're not going to be able to factor out an a, since you cannot do that evenly with 14. You would end up with a fraction rather than a whole number. So we can ignore the variables. We're not going to be able to pull a variable term from all three of these. So at this point, we just need to look at the numbers, 6, 8, and 14. And we want to look at their factor pairs. So 6, we could get 6 from multiplying 1 and 6, but we can also get 6 from multiplying 2 and 3. So these are the 4 different factors that would divide evenly into 6. And let's do the same thing for 8. So we can divide 8 by 1, by 2, by 4, and by itself, by 8. And then for 14, this is divisible by 1, by 2 since it's an even number, and since 2 goes into it, you could divide it by 2 to find that other factor pair, which is 7. So 2 times 7 is 14. And then 14 will also divide evenly into it. And one way to know that you're getting all of these common factors is you can essentially run through the prime numbers. Remember, we have 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, and so on. They are infinite. And for a number like 14, you can check 2, which works. And once you divide it by 2, you know 7 works as well. Then we can check 3, but 3 does not go into 14. For 3, you can always just add the digits. 1 plus 4 is 5, and 5 is not divisible by 3, so 14 is not divisible by 3. We could check 5, but it doesn't end in a 0 or 5. We know 7 works, and technically you really only have to check up to the square root of the number, which we know is between the square root of 16 and the square root of 9, so it's between 3 and 4. And so we really only have to check 2 and 3 for this one, and since 2 worked, we were able to find that other factor pair. But 3 didn't work, so after that, we don't have to even check the other ones. Now, the reason why this works is complicated, and I won't mention it in this video, but this is true. So we figured out the factors of each of our numbers. Now we're just looking for the greatest common one. And you can see that 2 is the greatest common factor of all three of these. Since if you look at the lowest one, 6, the ones bigger than that are 6 and 3, but they are not shared by the other two numbers. So 2, which is shared by all three, must be the greatest common factor. So our answer for this one is simply 2. So let's keep working. Now we have 30, 80, and 20. And like I mentioned, sometimes you can just recognize it. Like notice that they all end in 0, so 10 would go into these evenly. But you would even want to check further. So just to be safe, let's write out their factors again. And 20, we know we can multiply 1 and 20 to get 20. We can do 2 and 10, and we can do 4 and 5. And that should be the complete list because 3 doesn't work. And we only have to check up to the square root of 20, which is between 4 and 5 since the square root of 16 is less and the square root of 25 is more. And those are 4 and 5 respectively. So this is the complete list for 20. We can do 30 now. So we have 1 and 30, but it's also even, and 2 times 15 will give us 30. It's also divisible by 3, and so we can do 3 and 10, and we can also do 5 and 6. So it's a little bit messy for this one. Let me rewrite that just using a caret here. We can say 5 and 6 also work. And for 80, we can do 1 and 80. We can do 2 and 40. We can do, let's see, 4 would work on it since 3 won't. 4 and 20 work. And 5 would work since it ends in a 0. And 5 and 16 would work there. And again, we're running out of space, so I'll use a little caret. 6 won't work because 3 doesn't go into it. 7 won't work. 8 would work. We could do 8 and 10. And we just have to check 9 now since it's between these and we've narrowed down our list, but 9 does not go into this. So this is the complete list for all 3 of these numbers. Now we start with the smallest one, 20, and we can start at its largest factor and work our way backwards. So notice 20 goes into 20 and 80, but not into 30. So that one didn't work. And then we'll go to 10. But 10, you can see, is a common factor for all of these. And since that was the largest one that worked for our smallest number, we know that 10 is the greatest common factor, at least in terms of the numbers. So we know we can pull out a 10, but now we look at the variables, b squared, and b to the third. And we look for the smallest amount of that variable, so in this case b squared, since that's the most that we'll be able to pull out. We can pull out a b squared from all 3 of these because we won't be left with any fractions then. But if we tried to pull out anything bigger, like a b to the third power, then we'll end up with fractions and it's not evenly divisible. So in conclusion, we could pull out a 10 from each of these, and we can pull out a b squared from each of these. So 10b squared is the greatest common factor. And let's do one more. So for this one, we can again write out our numbers. Now keep in mind, this is not something you have to do every time. This is just one way that will for sure get you the right answer. So if you can't recognize the biggest number that goes into these, then you can write out their lists. So 14 we can get from multiplying 1 and 14, but we can also multiply 2 and 7 to get 14, and this is our complete list. We did this one above. For 35, we can do 1 and 35. 2 doesn't work, 3 doesn't work, but 5 works. So we can do 5 and 7. And we just have to check 6 since it's between these, but 6 does not go into 36. So this is our complete list here. And for 63, we can do 1 and 63. 2 doesn't work, but 3 does. It would be 3 times 21. And we could check 5, but that doesn't work. And we can check 7. So we're essentially just running through the prime numbers to see if they divide evenly into this. And 7 does. And 7 times 9 gives us 63. And we just, again, have to check right between them now since we've narrowed down our list from both sides. And 8 does not divide into 63. So we found our list of the common factors, and now we just have to figure out which one is the greatest. So we start with our smallest number, 14. And 14 will start at the top. 14 does not go into all 3 of them. So we'll move to the next one, 7. And you can see 7 does go into all 3 of them. So at least in terms of the numbers, we can pull out a 7 from each of them, or they each divide evenly by 7. And for the variables, notice they all have y to the 4th. So the largest amount of the variables that we can pull out or divide each of these by evenly would be y to the 4th. So our greatest common factor in this case is 7y to the 4th.